They were screaming my name, not out of love, not out of panic, but because security was dragging them across the marble floor like they didn't belong there anymore. My stepmother's voice cracked first. "You can't do this to us." My stepbrother tried to pull away from the guards, face red, humiliated in front of a crowd that just minutes ago he was bragging to. And me? I was standing at the center of it all, calm, watching. Because the island they thought they controlled, the place they abandoned me to die, it was mine. My name is Ayan. I'm 28. And until a few months ago, I thought I understood what family meant. Turns out, I didn't even come close. I grew up in a house that always looked perfect from the outside. Big gates, clean driveway, the kind of place people slow down to stare at. My father built everything from nothing. I mean that literally. He came from a background where survival wasn't guaranteed and somehow turned that into a multi-million-dollar business. But inside the house, things were different. My mother passed away when I was young. I barely remember her voice, just fragments, a laugh, the smell of her perfume. That's it. After that, it was just me and my dad for a while until he remarried. That's when everything changed. My stepmother didn't come in aggressively. No, she was smart, soft voice, polite smile, always acting like she cared. But there was something underneath it, something calculated. She had 2 kids from her previous marriage, my stepbrother, Samir, and my stepsister, Hira. From day one, I could tell I wasn't part of their picture. They weren't openly hostile. Not at first. It was smaller things. Conversations that stopped when I walked in. Plans made without me. Jokes I wasn't included in. And my dad, he noticed, but he always brushed it off. "They just need time," he'd say. "We're a family now." I wanted to believe that. I really did. So I kept my head down, focused on my own life, college, work, building something of my own. I never depended on them, never asked for anything, which, looking back, might have been exactly what they wanted. Because the less I asked, the less they had to give. The real shift happened when my dad's health started getting worse. It wasn't sudden. It crept in slowly. Doctor visits became more frequent. Phone calls got quieter. The energy in the house changed. And with that, their behavior changed too. My stepmother became overly involved in everything. Finances, documents, business discussions that I used to be part of. Samir suddenly took interest in the company despite never caring before. And Hira, she just watched, always watching, like she knew something I didn't. I remember one specific night, we were all sitting at dinner and my dad looked tired, really tired. Samir leaned back in his chair and casually said, "You should really start thinking about simplifying things. It's too much for you now." My stepmother nodded, pretending to be concerned. "He's right. You need to rest. Let us handle things." Let us. That word stuck with me. I looked at my dad, expecting him to push back, to say something, but he didn't. He just nodded, slowly. That was the first time I felt it. That quiet shift. Like something was moving behind the scenes and I wasn't part of it anymore. A few weeks later, my stepmother came to me with what she called a fresh start. "Ayan, we've all been through a lot," she said, sitting across from me like she was about to deliver good news. "Your father wants us to spend some time together, as a family." I didn't respond right away. That word again. Family. She smiled. "We've booked a private island trip. Just us. No distractions. A chance to reconnect." Samir chimed in from the doorway, smirking slightly. "Luxury villa, ocean views, don't say no too fast." Something about the way he said it felt off. Too rehearsed. Too eager. But I ignored it. Because a part of me, maybe the stupid part, still wanted to believe things could be normal. So I agreed. The island was exactly what they promised. Beautiful didn't even begin to cover it. Crystal clear water. White sand that felt unreal under your feet. A massive villa that looked like it belonged in a movie. Staff everywhere. Quiet. Efficient. Almost invisible. At first, everything felt fine. Too fine. They were nice to me. Nicer than usual. Conversations flowed. Laughter felt real. Or at least convincing. But then the small things started. The staff treated me differently. Not badly. Just carefully. Like they were waiting for something. One time, I asked one of them for a drink, and he paused for half a second too long before responding. Another time, I walked into the main office area, and 2 staff members immediately stopped talking and stepped aside. And the looks, those quick glances, like they recognized me but weren't sure how to act. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was overthinking, but deep down, something didn't sit right. On the third day, Samir came up to me with a plan. Bro, you've barely explored the island, he said, throwing an arm around my shoulder like we were actually close. There's this side completely untouched. No staff, no villas, just raw nature. I raised an eyebrow. And you're not coming? He laughed. Nah, I've seen it already. Plus, Mom wants me to stay back. Something about planning dinner. Of course. I hesitated. And he noticed. Relax, he said, his tone shifting slightly. What, you scared or something? There it was. That push. That challenge. So I went. The path was longer than I expected. The further I walked, the quieter everything became. No staff, no sounds from the villa, just the ocean and the wind. After about an hour, I stopped. Something felt off. Too quiet. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course. I turned back, walking faster this time. But when I got back to the main area, something was wrong. The villa was empty. Completely empty. No staff, no movement, no sound. Just silence. I felt my chest tighten. Ayan? Nothing. I walked inside. Rooms cleared out. Luggage gone. Gone. I ran outside, heart pounding now, scanning the shoreline. And that's when I saw it. The yacht. Far out in the distance, moving away. At first, my brain refused to process it. No, that didn't make sense. They wouldn't just... I pulled out my phone again. Dead. I checked my bag, my passport, gone. That's when it hit. Not slowly, all at once. They didn't forget me. They didn't lose track of time. They left me. On purpose. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the horizon. Minutes, maybe longer, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. Why? For what? What could they possibly gain from this? My thoughts were spiraling when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, calm. I turned around. One of the staff members was standing there, the same one who hesitated when I asked for a drink. He looked confused, concerned. Sir, he said carefully, we've been trying to reach you. I stared at him, still trying to catch up with reality. Where is everyone? I asked. He blinked. They left this morning. I know that. I snapped. Why am I still here? There was a pause, a long one. And then he said something that made everything stop. Sir, why would you be stranded? I frowned. What? He looked genuinely puzzled now. This island belongs to you. And just like that, everything changed. For a moment, I actually thought he was joking. I let out a short, confused laugh that didn't sound like me. Come on, I said, shaking my head. That's not funny. But the staff member didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He just stood there, serious. Sir, he said carefully, I'm not joking. This island is registered under your name. That's when the air shifted. Not around me, inside me. Because everything I had been trying to make sense of suddenly had a new direction. I took a step forward. Explain, I said. He nodded immediately, like he'd been waiting for permission to speak. We were informed months ago that ownership had been transferred into a private trust under your name. All operations, staffing, and security are managed according to your authorization. I stared at him, trying to process the words. Then why? I paused. Why did my family book this place like it was theirs? He hesitated. That hesitation told me more than his answer ever could. They used a third-party arrangement, he said finally. A shell, booking through an affiliated company. From our side, the reservation appeared valid, but ownership verification overrides everything. A shell arrangement. My chest tightened again, but this time, not from panic. From realization, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. My mind immediately jumped back to my stepmother. Her calm tone when she suggested the trip, Samir's eagerness, the way they pushed me to agree, the way everything felt, too smooth, too perfect. They didn't just invite me on a trip. They orchestrated this. But the question that hit hardest was simple. Why leave me behind? I looked back at the staff member. Do they know? I asked. He shook his head. We were instructed to follow the booking group's lead. We assumed all guests were traveling together. I exhaled slowly. So they left and didn't say anything. They informed us you would be departing separately later. I let out a quiet, bitter laugh. Of course they did. They didn't want suspicion. They didn't want questions. They wanted me gone. but not immediately gone. Just enough time to disappear without raising alarms. I sat down on the edge of a nearby stone bench, running my hands through my hair. My thoughts were racing now, not just about what happened, but why. What was the end game? If they wanted me out of the picture, why not confront me directly? Why go through all this effort? And then it hit me, not as a guess, as a possibility. That suddenly felt very real. This wasn't just about me being left behind. This was about control, my father's condition, the company, the assets, everything. If I was isolated, cut off, disoriented, I couldn't challenge anything, couldn't question anything, couldn't interfere. They weren't just abandoning me. They were removing me from the equation. I stood up again, my mind clearing into something sharper. Can you contact the mainland? I asked. Yes, he replied immediately. We have secure communication channels. Good. I need access. He nodded and gestured toward the main building. This way, sir. As we walked, I noticed something different now. The staff weren't confused anymore. They were attentive, more respectful, not because I had done anything, but because they now understood who I was. That realization alone felt strange. Less like power, more like exposure. Like a truth I'd been walking around without knowing. Inside the operations room, the atmosphere was quiet, controlled. Monitors lined the walls. Logs, communications, scheduling systems. Everything was precise. The staff member sat down and began pulling up records. Here, he said, turning the screen toward me. This is the ownership verification file. I leaned in. There it was. My name, clearly listed, attached to a private trust, signed, legal, final. I felt my stomach tighten again, because this wasn't something recent. This had been set up long before this trip. My father, he had done this, quietly, without telling me, or maybe he had tried to. My mind flashed back to the nights when he'd sit alone, looking at documents he never let anyone else see. The conversations he'd cut short when others entered the room. The subtle way he'd look at me, like he wanted to say something, but didn't. He knew. He had to have known. Do you know when this was created? I asked. The staff member checked another file. Approximately 6 months ago, he said. 6 months? Right around the time my father's health started declining more seriously. I leaned back in the chair. Everything was starting to connect. This wasn't just inheritance paperwork. This was preparation, planning, protection. My father wasn't just distributing assets. He was securing something, and somehow he chose me. I sat there in silence for a while, letting that sink in. Not the ownership, not the legal documents, but the implication behind it. Because if this island was mine, then what my family had done wasn't just abandonment. It was betrayal, calculated betrayal. They didn't just leave me behind. They believed I had no power to respond, that I would panic, struggle, disappear quietly. And by the time I returned, if I ever did, it would be too late, too disoriented, too weak to challenge anything. But they made one mistake. They underestimated how quickly things could turn. Can I see the guest booking records? I asked. The staff member nodded and pulled up another screen. Names, details, travel logs, everything from their arrival to their departure. I scanned through it carefully, and there it was. Their departure time, early morning. No notification to me, no communication, no attempt to explain, just gone. I clenched my jaw slightly. That confirmed it. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. I leaned forward again. Listen, I said quietly, my tone changing now, more focused. From this point on, I need full access to everything. He looked at me, waiting. Security logs, communication channels, staff coordination. I want visibility. Understood, sir. And one more thing. He paused. Yes. I looked him straight in the eye. Act like nothing has changed. That's when the plan started forming in my head. Not rushed, not emotional, calculated. Because now I understood something important. They didn't just leave me behind. They left behind a situation they didn't fully understand. And that meant they were still operating under assumptions. Assumptions I could use. Over the next hour, I stayed in the operations room, reviewing more details. Guest affiliations, contract structures, event schedules, and something stood out. There was a scheduled family gathering event listed in the system, set for 2 days from now. I frowned. Who organized this? I asked. The staff member checked again. It appears to be coordinated by the visiting group, he said. They requested an internal celebration event during their stay. Celebration. I leaned back slowly. So while they were abandoning me, they were planning a celebration. That made something inside me go still, because that told me everything I needed to know about how they viewed this entire situation. To them, I wasn't just missing. I was irrelevant. I stood up from the chair. Good, I said quietly. The staff member looked at me, slightly confused by my tone. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I was earlier. That had shifted into something more controlled, more deliberate. Prepare everything for that event, I continued. Exactly as planned. He nodded. Of course, sir. I turned and walked toward the window, looking out at the ocean again. The same ocean where their yacht had disappeared hours ago. This time, though, it didn't feel like I was left behind. It felt like they had walked into something they didn't understand. Because now I wasn't stranded. I wasn't abandoned. I was in control. And they had no idea. I turned back to the staff member. When do they return? I asked. According to their itinerary, tomorrow evening. I nodded slowly. Perfect. Because by then, everything would be ready. And they wouldn't be returning to the island they thought they owned. They'd be returning to something else entirely. And for the first time since they left me there, I allowed myself a small, quiet realization. This wasn't the end of the story. This was where it started turning in my favor. Tomorrow, they would arrive back at the island, smiling, celebrating, completely unaware that the ground beneath them was no longer theirs to stand on. The evening they were scheduled to return, the island didn't feel like a vacation spot anymore. It felt like a stage. Everything had been quietly prepared. Not loudly, not dramatically, just precisely. Staff were in position, security briefed, event layout finalized, guest names confirmed, every detail double-checked twice. And me? I wasn't pacing. I wasn't nervous. I was waiting. Because for the first time since this entire situation began, I knew exactly what was coming. The sun was beginning to set when the first boat appeared on the horizon. I stood near the main terrace, hands in my pockets, watching it approach. Same yacht, same group, same people who had smiled, laughed, and left me behind without a second thought. But this time, they were returning to something they didn't understand. One of the staff approached quietly beside me. They've arrived at the dock, sir. I nodded once. Good. From where I stood, I could already imagine their expressions. Relaxed, confident, probably laughing about the trip, about how everything had gone according to their plan, completely unaware that their plan had already been flipped. Moments later, voices began echoing from the dock area. Laughter. Casual conversation. Samir's voice stood out first. Finally back. I needed that break. My stepmother followed. I told you this would be perfect. Exactly what we needed. There it was again. That tone, that sense of ownership, of control. I exhaled slowly. Let them settle in, I said to the staff beside me. Yes, sir. They were escorted from the dock toward the main villa area, where the family gathering event had already been set up. Tables arranged, lighting adjusted, music softly playing. Guests were beginning to gather some other invited visitors, a few business affiliates, individuals who had been added to the list as part of the broader event coordination. Everything looked exactly like what they expected. A celebration, a continuation of their narrative. I stayed out of sight for the first few minutes. Let them feel comfortable. Let them talk. Let them believe they were in control. Because confidence makes people careless. And careless people reveal everything without realizing it. From a distance, I watched Samir walk in first, immediately scanning the area with a satisfied expression. This place is insane, he said, loud enough for others to hear. We picked the right spot. My stepmother followed closely behind, adjusting her outfit, already preparing to engage with the other guests. Let's make the most of this, she added with a smile. They looked normal, relaxed, like nothing had happened, like no one had been left behind. Then their eyes landed on the room layout. Something subtle changed in their expressions. There were more people than expected, not just staff, not just their family, strangers, professionals, observers. Samir frowned slightly. Did you invite people? He asked my stepmother. She glanced around, her smile tightening just a bit. No, I thought this was just our group. That was the first crack, just a small one, but noticeable, because now the situation wasn't as private as they thought. I waited until the room reached a natural pause. Conversations settling, drinks being served, people finding their seats. Then I stepped forward. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just calmly walking into view from the side of the terrace entrance. And the moment I appeared, I saw it. The shift. Samir noticed me first. His expression changed almost instantly. Confusion, then disbelief, then something closer to irritation. Wait, he muttered under his breath. My stepmother turned next. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second, her composure slipped. Just slightly, but enough. I didn't say anything at first. I just walked forward, slowly, deliberately, each step echoing faintly across the polished floor. The room started to quiet down as people noticed the tension. Something was off. You could feel it. Samir took a step forward. Ayan, he said, his tone forced into casualness. You're here. I stopped a few feet away from them. Yeah, I replied simply. A pause followed. A long one. My stepmother stepped in quickly, forcing a smile. We were worried about you, she said. We thought you were going to meet us later. There it was. The lie. Smooth, prepared, but now unnecessary. Because the room was watching, listening. I tilted my head slightly. Interesting, I said calmly. That one word shifted the energy again. People around us started paying closer attention. Samir chuckled lightly. Relax, man. You're acting like something's wrong. I looked at him directly. Nothing's wrong, I said. Another pause. Then I added, not for me. That got their attention. Not just theirs. Everyone's. My stepmother's smile faded just a bit. What does that mean, she asked. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I turned slightly toward the crowd. Then back to them. You both really thought this would end differently, didn't you? Samir frowned. What are you talking about? I exhaled slowly, and then I said it. Let's clear something up. I gestured toward the staff standing nearby. Bring the ownership documents. That's when the room changed. Completely. The staff moved immediately. Without hesitation, without questioning, a folder was brought forward and handed to me. I opened it, placed it on the table in front of them, and slid it across. Samir looked down at it first, then my stepmother. Their expressions shifted as they read. Line by line, name, ownership, trust structure, authorization, and then silence. Samir let out a short laugh. This is a joke, right? No one laughed with him. I shook my head slightly. No. My stepmother's eyes narrowed. This can't be real, she said quickly. We booked this island through proper channels. You booked access, I replied calmly, not ownership. That hit, not loudly, but clearly. The crowd was quiet now, watching, processing. Some of the guests exchanged glances. Others leaned in slightly. They could sense the direction this was going. Samir's confidence started slipping. Okay, he said, trying to regain control. Even if that's true, what are you implying? I looked at him. Directly. No implication, I said. Just facts. I paused, then continued. You left me behind, on an island you don't own. Thinking I had no way to respond, a subtle shift moved through the room. People were beginning to understand the situation. Not fully, but enough. My stepmother stepped forward again, her voice tighter now. That's not what happened. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? She hesitated. Just for a second. Then tried again. We didn't abandon you. We thought you were coming separately. Samir quickly added, yeah, exactly. It was a misunderstanding. I nodded slowly. A misunderstanding. I repeated the words, then looked at the room again. Is that what you call leaving someone behind without notice, disabling communication, and departing without informing them? No one answered. They didn't need to. I stepped closer to them, lowering my voice slightly. So let's stop pretending. A long pause followed. Then I turned slightly towards security. Please proceed. That's when it happened. The guard stepped forward, not aggressively, not violently, but decisively. Samir's eyes widened. Wait, what is this? He said, stepping back slightly. My stepmother's voice rose. On what authority are you doing this? I looked at her, calm, composed. On mine. The guards moved in, one on each side. Samir tried to resist at first. This is ridiculous. Do you know who we are? No one responded, because it didn't matter anymore. His voice started to echo slightly as he was guided toward the exit. My stepmother's composure broke fully now. "You can't humiliate us like this," she shouted, her voice carrying across the room. But it was too late. The room had already seen everything. Guests stood silently, watching, processing. Some in shock, others simply observing the fall of a narrative they had just been presented with. Samir struggled briefly before stopping, realizing resistance wouldn't change anything. My stepmother's final words echoed as she was escorted out. "This isn't over." I watched them leave, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just clarity. When the doors closed behind them, the room remained quiet for a moment longer. Then slowly, conversations resumed. But the energy had shifted permanently. People understood what had just happened. Not just the removal, but the exposure. I stood there for a few seconds longer, then turned slightly toward the remaining guests and simply said, "Enjoy the evening." Later that night, after everything had settled, I stood alone on the terrace again, looking out at the ocean, the same view, the same island. But everything else had changed. They had arrived expecting control, expecting ownership, expecting dominance over a situation they believed was already resolved in their favor. Instead, they walked into the consequences of their own assumptions. And for the first time since this entire situation began, I wasn't the one reacting. I was the one deciding what came next.